All right, hi everyone, my name is Jonathan, and I'm going to talk to you about how do you scale your data platforms. So before I begin, I've got some questions I'd like to ask the audience here. Can I get a show of hands? How many of you here have experienced pains where customers are complaining to you about long lead times? Anyone experiencing that? So you've got data products that people are saying, I want it now, give it to me. Yes, plenty of us have experienced that. Do you have experiences with a never-ending backlog of requests? Show of hands. Everyone here? Yep. How about your apps or your ETL pipelines, I should say, are taking a lot longer to execute and costing a lot more to run? Anyone have felt that pain as well? Some? Yeah, not as much. The last one is quite dear to me, but how many of you are experiencing burnout or have managing teams that are experiencing burnout at the moment? Okay, all right. Or maybe you don't want to admit that you're burning out. Okay, so what are these pains that we're feeling with our data platforms and data products that we built? I want to define these pains as what I call molting pains of scale. So if you think about our very delicious WA rock lobsters, anyone love your rock lobsters? Have them on barbecues? As part of the growth and life cycle of a lobster, there's going to come a point in the lobster's life where it needs to shed its exoskeleton or its shell and get out of it so that it can actually grow. And that is because the lobster needs to grow, right? It's going to outgrow its existing shell. And that's an analogy that I like to use to explain the kind of pains that we're feeling with data platforms. We build a data platform for a certain capacity or for a certain requirement. And now what we're feeling with all the pains that we just talked about is that we're outgrowing that scale. So just a little bit about my background. I've been with Canva now for 2.5 years as a senior data platform engineer. I'm as Lars mentioned, founder of Data Engineer Camp. Actually, we do have some people who've done the camp in the audience here. Hi, hello. So welcome. And I love building data platforms. I've been doing data platforms and building them for different companies for the last 8 years. And yeah, we'd love to continue to do that for more companies in the future. Okay, so enough about my background. I'm just going to talk to you about Canva's data platform and how we kind of experienced some scale issues that you've likely experienced yourselves and how we got out of those scale issues. So Canva's platform has grown quite quickly. It started sometime in 2017. We launched a data platform. We use a CDP provider called Treasure Data. We used that for a couple of years and found that wasn't quite what we needed, and we re-architected the platform in sometime between 2019 to 2020, and that's where you see a spike of contributions start to begin in the data platforms. Well, today we have 400 to almost 450 contributors to the data platform. So these are your engineers, data scientists, ML engineers, all sorts of people who are writing code and building data assets on the platform, 400 to 450 contributors or people. And that becomes about 7,000 PRs every year. Not just the contributions that have been growing, but the data that we are storing and processing as well has been growing quite rapidly. Today we store around 25 petabytes of data, and that comes from data that we ingest into the platform, but also data that's derived from data from within the ingested data set. So lots of transformations being done and new data assets being produced. So with all that scale, we've learned a couple of lessons here, and I have 5 key lessons I want to share with you on how these principles and lessons helped us to actually scale and to grow our platform to serve our customers. So the first lesson I will talk to you is how do you is aligning your data platform to business value. All right, so many data platforms kind of look a little bit like this sometimes, where it's like a golden toilet. It's very shiny, it looks cool, it looks awesome. People think it's really nice, and I'm an engineer, I love building things that look great. But what purpose does it solve, or what function does it solve, or what do we use it for, right? Oftentimes we build data platforms that feel like it's just like a golden toilet. It's not really solving any customer needs. So I want to bring us back to how do we start to begin to think about the problems and the business value that we're trying to solve for our customers. And a way for us to think about this, or a framework we can use to think about this, is what I call the value driver tree, or rather, I didn't call it, but it's what McKinsey calls it, value driver tree. So according to the value driver tree, you want to start with the end in mind. What sort of problems are you trying to solve for the business? Every business has a bottom line. Every business is aiming for profitability. How do we achieve profitability? Well, we can increase revenue or we can decrease costs, right? Economics or finance 101. Well, let's take it a step further. How do we increase revenue? We can either increase the users for this product or we can increase the average price per user for this product. Okay, makes sense. Well, how do we do that? So we can increase users by trying to grow this product and launch this product into different markets. So that's what we call product localization at Canva. So we're trying to break into different markets. So we're trying to make Canva a bit more user-friendly to people of different countries. We can also try to grow the B2B offering. So not just target your B2C consumers, but let's target enterprises and we can charge them a higher price as well. How do we achieve those things? Well, let's drill even further. And from my perspective, from data, well, to inform product localization and to inform us what kind of enterprise customers we should aim for, we need to know where these customers are, who are the customers, who are the markets we should target. And so to help us get there, we need to have shorter time to analytics so we can produce more insights quicker. And we need insights that is going to be highly valuable, right? We don't just want nonsense piece of information that's not going to help us make a decision. And finally, we get down to data platform. So you can see we've kind of gone all the way down from the business level to what we can provide as a data platform to our customers, who are people within the business. And so it's going to come down to what capabilities we want to offer, like analytics, data ingestion. Can we make data ingestion something that's self-service? Can we automate some of these parts of these data platform processes? Can we create orchestration, make it easy for our users to use? Can we reduce the overheads or software defects by introducing testing and CI/CD? So the way we've approached this at Canva is that we begin every 6 months with a cycle plan. And what informs our plan for us to focus on for the next 6 months is what is the business trying to do? We speak to our business customers, we get information from the leadership, and we take that and we translate that to what capabilities in our platform we need to either build, which we don't have today, or that we need to enhance. And from a platform perspective, we've broken it down into, like, broadly speaking, this kind of broad boxes here where we have core capabilities, where these are things that are used to perform the data stuff that we do. And then you have supporting capabilities like testing and CI/CD. So all these things are informed, and what we want to focus on for the next 6 months informed by the business. So that was point one. We want to focus on value drivers and not build the golden toilet. Point number two is that we want to choose the right topology for our platform architecture. On the top, you see a map of a city, Tucson, Arizona, which has a capacity or population size of 500,000 inhabitants. And you'll see that Tucson actually has 2 highways demarcated by the green lines there. And then on the bottom, you actually see a different city, Charlotte, North Carolina, which has double that in terms of population. And what's really interesting here, okay, is that not just the highways you have more highways, of course, you have more green lines showing, but it also has this red line boundary that, if you can see, look closely, that starts to appear. And this is not just with cities that are like North Carolina alone. This is every city across the world experiences a similar phenomenon, right? Once a city gets to a certain size, these highways are going to not be enough for traffic to go through, right? It's going to create a lot of congestion. It's going to be really slow for people to get to their destination. And so what tends to happen is cities start to create these ring roads, these red lines that connects different suburbs together. The same kind of philosophy works as well with data platforms, right? Well, most of us start our data platform with a centralized approach. We build our data platforms as a single monolithic application. I can't pronounce the word. And what I mean by that is that we develop the platform and we deploy the platform or the code and the assets that come with the platform as a single unit. So you extract, you load, you transform. For every use case, it's a single unit of change. If we want to think about decentralization and think about how we can create these ring roads to enable travel to happen faster, to allow teams to innovate faster and become more agile, Well, we want to shift towards a decentralized approach where we have domain teams, so teams that can then create their own data assets and deploy them independently of other teams' assets that they own. And they can also connect and talk to each other like the ring roads do. They can kind of share data with each other. So that's what we call a data mesh, right? I think we've talked about that today. And historically speaking, it's used to be known as microservices. So in the web development world, software engineering world, that's what it's called. But I want to raise an important point here, and that is we don't just want to decentralize architecture when we experience problems of scale, but we also want to think about how we can change the way we work, change the way we organize our teams. So according to Conway's law, a lot of how we build things, it depends or is very much based on how we structure ourselves, how we communicate as an organism, as a species. So according to his law, it states that, how the systems you design and the things you produce are very much going to replicate how your organization is structured. And so I want us to think not just decentralizing the architecture, but how do we decentralize people and teams? Historically speaking, you might use a team structure like the one on the left, where you have a team responsible for ingestion and someone for SQL warehousing, processing, and someone to create dashboards. So you have 3 separate teams in your organization to do that. Well, when we move to a decentralized approach, we need to think a bit different. We need to have individuals embedded within those domain teams that can perform that role. So perhaps a team like Team A there in the diagram needs to have a data scientist within a team, a data analyst, and a data engineer. That's how the teams need to be structured to support a decentralized approach. As you can imagine, that's not going to become cheap. It means a lot of more hiring, a lot more headcount you need to add to your teams. So I want to kind of pose to us as well that maybe data mesh is not the right answer for everybody, right? Yes, we use data mesh at Canva, Atlassian uses it, Netflix uses it, but is that the right solution for you? It depends. As Aidan said, consulting 101, right? So according to this graph, it's a very just broad graph. It's not very specific or anything, but it's showing us that you can actually grow your business and grow your data platform through a centralized platform function until you reach some kind of inflection point. So as your data platform starts to grow in terms of complexity, perhaps you have more use cases you're adding to your platform, you have more demands on your platform teams, your engineering teams, you start to come to a point where if you keep going, you start to realize that the impact you're delivering to your customers is going to drop. Why? Because you're experiencing pains of scale. You're going to take longer to deliver things, people are going to get burned out, so your effectiveness is really going to drop beyond that point. At that inflection point is when, yes, maybe think about data mesh, right? But do we start data mesh day one? No, not necessarily. We can always start with centralized and then move into a data mesh architecture at some point in the future. And in fact, that's what we did at Canva as well. So we started centrally first. We managed all the dashboards, all the transformation pipelines, and all the ingestion through tools in-house. We realized that we weren't fast enough and weren't agile enough to support analytics, so we opened that up to our users. Okay, data mesh it. Then we started getting requests for people saying, you know what, Mode or whatever dashboarding tool we're using at that time did not have enough compute power. We want to do the compute ourselves as well in the warehouse. And so we gave people access to the warehouse as well, allowed them to build their own transformations. Along the way, we changed our stacks. We moved from Hive SQL to Snowflake SQL and used a tool called dbt as well. And then we also found that people wanted to ingest data much more quickly because we were controlling the ingestion still. And then it came to a point where we had lots of third-party APIs we tried to integrate with, and it was a long lead runtime before we could actually provision the data that the teams needed. So again, we outsourced that capability into a vendor called Fivetran that could create connectors for us out of the box and allow self-service ingestion to occur. And then we changed our responsibilities from an engineering team, from building the assets, into more of a support team, someone that actually provides everybody else who's using the platform with some defined best practices. So our responsibilities started to shift. And importantly, a big lesson I learned along the way is that we actually should always define our ownership model as we start to change these responsibility lines. The mistake that we had done is we weren't very clear. People still thought that we were responsible for these data assets, and whenever something broke, they would come to us and say, hey, please fix this ingestion pipeline for us. And they were expecting us to do that. So it's important that we make sure along the way to define what we will do and what we won't do, especially when these lines start to change. Okay, my third principle is around building composable components. So if I ask you a question, right, what road would you rather drive on to get to your destination faster? Would you rather drive on the road on the left or the road on the right? Can I get a show of hands? How many would want to drive on the road, an unpaved road on the right? Show of hands. Okay, I'm guessing you like adventure and you want to take your four-wheel drive out and bushwhack. But most of us would prefer the one on the right. Am I guessing right? Yeah, right. Left. Sorry, you're left. So most of us would prefer the paved road. It feels a lot more comfortable on our bumps when you're driving quickly. We get to our destination quickly. Well, this is kind of the experience that we should think about creating when we create data platforms. Okay, we want to create an experience where when people use our platform, we want people to feel like they're driving on a paved road. When they want to build something, they want to use an ingestion pipeline, it should feel like the thing on the right. I think paved roads is a great analogy and it's often overused in software. It's great for explaining the experiences and what we're trying to create, but I do not think it's great explaining how to actually create data platform products. So I would like to propose another analogy to help us understand how to build data products, and that is the construction analogy. So in construction, when we want to build an apartment complex, we can use things called modular blocks that has the concrete and the rebars already installed, and we can just grab the entire modular block and plonk it into the spot where we want it to be. And then there are certain parts of the apartment complex where it's a bit harder to reach, harder to get to. Perhaps we need to plaster some walls. In such cases, we need to have building materials and people, like construction engineers, who would go in and actually use those building materials to fix any gaps that the modular blocks do not provide. So I think that would be a better way to describe how we should design our data platforms. We should design it with both of these interfaces in mind. So the way we've done it at Canva is that when we design a infrastructure as code tool, we created this IAC tool called Tundra, which we use to provision resources inside of Snowflake. There are things like Terraform and so on and so forth, but we decided to kind of build something from scratch. When we built that tool, we designed a tool, we created primitives within the tool. So things like we want to create databases, or you want to create a schema, or you want to create a row or a user. We created those primitives first. And then we use those primitives to create our composable blocks on the right there. So the composable block allows people to very easily say, I want to have an entire database with these schemas and rows created. And they could do so with just 6 lines of code very quickly. So what we expose to our users, we actually expose both interfaces, not just the composable block, because we know that most people can benefit from it, but some people will need customizations when they're using your platform. And you want to offer them the customization aspects as well. So expose both interfaces and use one to build the other. Okay, my next point is around driving adoption. So now that we have an awesome platform, how do we get people to actually use the platform in the way we've intended for it to be used? We've got carrot and we've got stick. I grew up in Singapore, and so I like to use a different analogy here instead of carrot and sticks. It sounds very, I don't want to treat people like animals. But in Singapore, it's really interesting because we have a government that wants to implement a lot of policies and drive behaviors a certain way for its citizens in Singapore. One of the kind of behaviors that the government wants to actually achieve is to get people to eat healthier, which will increase the life expectancy of Singaporeans. And it would actually decrease healthcare costs and essentially create an economy where people are working for more years of their lives, which sucks. But the way government is doing that in Singapore is that they're introducing this healthier choice option, where if you eat a product or buy a product from the supermarket that is healthier choice, they actually give you a subsidy, a discount on that product. So that's incentives. On the flip side, if you've ever taken the MRT or transport system in Singapore, you will see this sign on the walls plastered everywhere. If you try to grab McDonald's, right, which costs $5 and you eat it on the train, your McDonald's will cost you $505. So there are fines and penalties all over Singapore because they want to stop people from doing certain things, especially when the transport system supports a lot of people. So how do we use these sort of concepts and penalties and incentives to drive behavior in our platform? One of the big things that we were really struggling with for quite a while was how do we get people to write documentation? How many of you here do not like to write documentation? Show of hands. It's all of us, right? We experienced the exact same problem. Nobody wanted to write docs. They want to write code, they want to ship code, and then they want to see the assets being run in production, and that's great, that's a win. So we wanted to write documentation. We wanted people to describe what columns existed in their data sources and the assets they produce, what data types, what are the semantic meanings behind the assets they produce. So how do we actually get them to do that? We use an incentives approach to achieving that. We have this thing called the growth and development framework, which drives people's performance review. So how much you're going to get paid by the end of the year. And also your promotion cycle is driven by this development framework as well. And very importantly, we added, or not we, but the company engineering as a whole, all software engineers in the company has to now write documentation in order to get a good review. So overnight, as soon as we introduced this policy, everybody wanted to write docs. Everybody wanted to go back to the existing code base and, oh, crap, here's a piece of code that I did not document, and start writing docs and try to use that as a way to apply for a role change or promotion. So we solved that one problem. Another problem that we're looking to solve is breaking dependencies. So here's an example where a developer might produce a data model or data asset, and then somebody else might consume that data asset and build more things on top of it. Okay, very commonly used pattern. Now, the problem here is that the owner of the data asset, let's say model 2 in the middle there, they can decide one day to drop the column, all right, because they felt like, don't need this column anymore, decide to just drop it, or even change the data type. That can actually cause a lot of problems for people downstream of them, right? People expecting that column to exist, but no longer is it there. So we tried lots of, can I just get a show of how many of you experienced this problem? Okay, so all of us here have also experienced that. Now, we've tried to solve this a couple of ways. We tried to say, do the right things, people, please make sure that you allow communication to occur and allow enough time for people to adopt the change and so on and so forth. But that didn't quite pan out. People took the easiest route. They just cared about their own remit and their own assets that they own. So the way that we solved that was we used a stick approach or a penalty approach. We said to people, if nobody wants to do the right thing, we'll force you to do the right things. So developers cannot merge their PR unless a very particular CI check that we as a platform team wrote passes. So we wrote a completely new CI check from scratch using things like BuildKite and Dexter that essentially performs that dependency check. So we prevented people from ever introducing breaking changes. And that saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars every year on developer time trying to make fixes and backfill data that was missing. Okay, so last principle I want to share with you is measure and evolve. So as part of your platform journey, you would come across platform metrics that you would like to build. So I'll share with you some examples of metrics that we have put in place at Canva. We've put in place metrics that tell us whether our project runs or DBT project runs was successful or failed. We had metrics around assets that we own or people produce, so DBT models and how often these things would pass or fail, or how long these things took to run and how much did they cost. We also had metrics around the data quality of the assets that were produced, what accuracy scores we were having, what completeness of data, what uniqueness do we have with our data. We use tools like Big Eye to actually help us to do some of these work. We have metrics around other functions of our platform, like the CI pipelines that I talked about. So all these metrics are great. All these metrics are great at helping us understand what our platform is doing, what problems are occurring with our platform, and helping us to react to these problems quickly and solve some of these issues. But metrics are not just great for these things. Measuring the platform performance isn't just for operational purposes. We can measure the platform to help us understand and think strategically about what we want to build next and what we should focus on next. So I want to talk about an example where one of the strategic initiatives that we took was to try to reduce time to insight. To help us understand where we would even begin to reduce time to insight, we look at our developer workflow. And we took statistics and numbers from our workflow and tried to understand where was the longest time or which parts of the process our developers were using felt the most pain and the most time being spent. So here's a typical workflow that we use. We have a process where you would check out a new Git branch. As soon as you check out a Git branch, you can then either use a shared dev environment to develop your code in, or you can create a new isolated developer environment, or what we call a PR environment. You would then develop and test your code against either the shared or the isolated environment, and then eventually run your tests and merge your code. We found that the creation of that PR environment took 45 minutes. All right? So when people wanted to even begin doing work, they had to wait 45 minutes before they can do so. What that led to is everyone deciding, and 400 people, deciding to say, let's just use the shared cloud environment, right? Shared dev environment. As you can imagine, with 400 people contributing code, very quickly people started stepping on each other's toes. Someone will make a change and that will overwrite a table that somebody else is working on. And so that introduces a whole host of other problems as well. So once we knew where the problem was and where the largest time savings could be achieved, we then went to fix that problem. So we managed to rewrite the entire PR environment generation process and got it down to just under 5 minutes. So the time it takes to boil coffee and come back is the time it takes to spin up a new dev environment for yourself. So what that led to is, firstly, we saved on time to insight, so people could ship stuff quicker. But also, we unintentionally made it very easy for people to want to use this new feature, where more people started adopting the PR environment approach, and that saved us all these issues with the shared dev environment. So my point here is that when we build products, we should not think of products or platforms as a project, where we build something, we think it's done. Instead, I would kind of ask us to think about measuring how we're doing as a platform, not just for operations, but to help us to think and understand strategically about how the platform is performing, and then learn from it and go back to the drawing board and say, what else do we want to build next? Use the value driver tree to help us think about what's next. This is known as the build, measure, learn feedback cycle. It's in a book called The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. It's a really good book. And that's it from me. I just want to recap now the 5 principles. The first is to align to business value. So don't build golden toilets. Let's build something that aligns to business value. Second is to choose the right topology. So yes, mesh is cool, mesh is sexy, but mesh may not be right for you. Build composable components. So think about the building blocks and the primitives and create interfaces for your users to have both. Number 4 is to drive adoption. How do you do that? You can use the carrot or you can use the stick. And number 5 is measure and evolve. So when we experience problems, going back to this lobster analogy here, when you experience problems of scale, you're going to feel a lot of pain, right? You're going to feel like, why am I feeling so much pain? Why am I feeling burnout from my job? I want you to think about the little lobster here. The little lobster knows it's feeling pain, and it decides to do what? It decides to shed its exoskeleton and grow. So that's what I want to ask us to do. Let's just remind ourselves of the lobster and evolve our platforms so that we can grow. Okay, thanks everyone.